Cheating wife said, "I'm not attracted to you anymore. I need an alpha. Go away." I got epic revenge. When she looked at me across the kitchen table that night, her eyes were cold and unfamiliar. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, spoke words that carved themselves into my chest like knives. "I'm not attracted to you anymore," she said without hesitation, her voice sharp with something that sounded like disgust. "I need an alpha. Go away." For a moment, I thought I hadn't heard her correctly. My hands, still holding the coffee cup, trembled slightly. The house that had once been filled with laughter and warmth now seemed to echo with a hollow silence, and her words burned through me. She didn't flinch. She didn't hesitate. It was as if she had rehearsed every syllable until it came out perfectly cruel. I wanted to shout, to slam my fist on the table, to demand answers. But instead, I sat there frozen. Memories of the years we spent together flashed before my eyes. Late nights whispering dreams, shared struggles, the quiet moments when I thought love was unbreakable. Now it all seemed like a lie. She had already checked out, already buried what we had, and already decided I was no longer enough. It wasn't long before I discovered the truth behind her sudden detachment. There was another man, the kind of man she had labeled alpha. Loud, arrogant, with a presence that demanded attention. He had been circling her for months while I was too busy holding our world together. And she had fallen, or perhaps, more accurately, she had chosen to leap. The betrayal cut deeper than her words. I watched from the shadows of my own broken home as she flaunted her new choice. Social media posts filled with hollow smiles, nights where she wouldn't come home, whispers among friends who pitied me but didn't dare say anything. She thought I was broken, defeated, humiliated beyond repair. She thought she had crushed me completely. But what she didn't understand was that betrayal can forge a new kind of fire. It doesn't just destroy, it rebuilds, reshapes, and sharpens. At first, I sank into the darkness of it all. The sleepless nights, the questions of self-worth, the crushing silence when I lay in bed alone. Yet deep inside, something else stirred, a quiet determination, a hunger for redemption. I began with myself. Every morning I dragged my body out of bed before dawn, running until my lungs burned and my legs screamed. I returned to the gym, every weight lifted a declaration that I would not stay broken. My body hardened, my strength returned, and with every drop of sweat I shed the weakness she had accused me of. But it wasn't just the body, it was the mind, too. I devoured books on leadership, confidence, and strategy. I learned to master my emotions rather than be ruled by them. I reconnected with old friends, rebuilt bridges she had once pushed me away from. I poured my energy into work, and soon, opportunities began to open. Promotions, investments, and finally, the birth of a business that carried my name into rooms she could only dream of entering. Months passed, then a year, and when I finally looked in the mirror, the man staring back at me was unrecognizable. Strong, focused, dangerous in his calm confidence. Not the broken shell she had left behind, but someone forged from fire and betrayal into something far greater. It was then that fate arranged our paths to cross again. I walked into a high-profile event, invited as a keynote speaker for the very company that had once dismissed me. The room was full of powerful faces, and among them, I saw her. She was standing beside him, the so-called alpha she had chosen. Except now, he looked smaller, diminished. His arrogance had dulled, his eyes distracted. And she looked worn, desperate even, her smile strained as if painted on for the crowd. When she saw me, the color drained from her face. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. I stood tall, dressed sharply, carrying the quiet authority of a man who had rebuilt his kingdom. People surrounded me, eager to shake my hand, to hear my words. I saw the realization flicker in her eyes. She had thrown away gold for fool's silver. I didn't gloat, didn't sneer. Revenge didn't come in cruel words or dramatic confrontations. It came in the quiet power of my presence, in the undeniable truth that I had become everything she claimed I wasn't. While she had chased a shadow of strength, I had built the real thing. And now she stood watching, wishing, regretting. Later that evening, she found me alone on the terrace. Her voice was softer now, trembling with something that sounded almost like humility. "You've changed," she whispered, her eyes searching mine. "You're different, stronger." I looked at her, the woman who had once shattered me with a single sentence, and for the first time, I felt nothing but clarity. "No," I said quietly, "I've always been this man. You just didn't see it." Her eyes filled with unspoken regret, but it didn't matter anymore. I had moved beyond her, beyond the pain, beyond the need for her validation. My revenge wasn't in taking her back or proving her wrong with words. It was in living a life so complete, so powerful, that she would forever remember the moment she told me to go away. And as I turned and walked back into the crowd, surrounded by respect, opportunity, and the future I had forged, I knew she would carry that memory like a ghost that would never let her rest. The man she had abandoned had become the man she could never have again. That was the epic revenge. Silent, undeniable, eternal. The night she ended our marriage wasn't loud or theatrical. It was quiet, almost surgical. She sat across from me at the kitchen table, the place where we had shared countless meals, countless moments, countless secrets, and looked at me with eyes that no longer belonged to the woman I thought I knew. "I'm not attracted to you anymore," she said, her voice cutting through the silence like glass shattering on stone. "I need an alpha. Go away." For a second, I thought I had misheard her. I blinked, trying to process the words, trying to piece together the fragments of what she had just said. But her expression didn't falter. Her lips curled slightly in disdain, her eyes narrowing with a kind of detached contempt that made me feel smaller than I had ever felt in my life. "An alpha," I finally managed, my throat dry, my voice weak. She didn't blink. "Yes, a real man. Someone who makes me feel alive. You don't do that anymore." The word, "anymore," echoed in my head like a cruel afterthought. I sat frozen, my hands wrapped around the ceramic coffee mug, its heat grounding me to reality. My wife, the woman I had sacrificed for, laughed with, cried with, and trusted with every piece of my soul, had just dismissed me like I was nothing. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. I wanted to scream, to demand how she could throw away years together so easily. I wanted to ask her why, to remind her of everything we had endured, everything I had given. But deep down, I already knew. She had found someone else. The signs had been there, subtle at first. Late nights at work. The phone she kept close, face down. The sudden bursts of laughter at texts I wasn't privy to. I had ignored them, blinded by love, convincing myself that my doubts were just insecurities. Now the truth sat across from me, smug and unapologetic. "There's someone else," I whispered, though it wasn't a question. She didn't even deny it. She leaned back in her chair, folding her arms, her silence louder than any confession. That was the confirmation. My chest tightened, my stomach churned, and the coffee in my hand tasted like ash. "Who is he?" I asked. Her lips curved into something between a smile and a smirk. "Someone who knows what he wants. Someone strong. Not soft like you." Her words weren't just a betrayal, they were an execution. And I sat there, helpless, as the life I had built crumbled in an instant. That night, she left, packed a bag without shame, without hesitation, and walked out the door. The sound of it slamming shut reverberated through the walls of the house, leaving me in a silence so heavy it suffocated me. The days that followed were a blur of numbness. I went to work like a ghost, dragging myself through tasks, forcing smiles at colleagues who could sense something was wrong but didn't ask. At night, the house was too big, too empty. I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying her words over and over. Not attracted to you anymore. I need an alpha. I spiraled. I drank more than I should have, skipped meals, lost weight. Friends reached out, but I avoided them. I couldn't face their pity. I couldn't bear to tell them that my wife had chosen another man because I wasn't enough. The shame was heavier than the heartbreak. And then came the humiliation. Photos of her and him began to appear online. Pictures of them at restaurants, smiling, holding hands. Her head resting on his shoulder, her eyes lit up in ways I hadn't seen in years. Mutual friends whispered. I could feel their judgment when they looked at me, their silent thoughts screaming, "She left you for someone better." That was the lowest point of my life. The moment I realized that the woman I had given everything to not only betrayed me, but mocked me by flaunting her new prize in public. But something inside me refused to stay down. At first, it was just anger, burning, searing anger that kept me awake at night. Anger at her, at him, but mostly at myself for allowing it all to happen. For becoming complacent, for losing the fire I once had. That anger became fuel. One morning, after another sleepless night, I stood in front of the bathroom mirror. My reflection was hollow, gaunt, with dark circles under my eyes. I barely recognized the man staring back, but behind those broken eyes, I saw something else, a flicker of defiance. This isn't the end, I whispered to myself. That day, I made a decision. If she wanted an alpha, then I would become something far greater. Not for her, not to win her back, but for me. To reclaim the man I had once been, and to rise into someone even stronger. The first step was my body. I joined a gym, though at first I could barely lift half of what others did. I ran until my lungs burned, sweat dripping onto the treadmill like blood from a wound. The soreness was unbearable at first, my body screaming in protest. But every ache, every strain, was a reminder that I was rebuilding. The second step was my mind. I stopped numbing myself with alcohol and started devouring books. Psychology, leadership, business, philosophy, anything that sharpened my perspective and fueled my resolve. I began to understand that strength wasn't just about muscles or dominance. True strength came from control, over emotions, over decisions, over destiny. The third step was my circle. I reconnected with old friends, people she had subtly pushed me away from during our marriage. They welcomed me back, some with open arms, others with cautious sympathy. But soon they saw the change in me, the fire returning. I surrounded myself with people who pushed me, who challenged me, who refused to let me sink back into weakness. Months turned into a year. Slowly, I transformed. My body hardened, my confidence grew, my career flourished. I took risks at work, risks that paid off. Promotions, new responsibilities, and eventually the courage to step out and start my own business. It was terrifying, but the hunger inside me wouldn't let me play safe anymore. And then came the moment of reckoning. It was a high-profile event, hosted by a corporation I now worked closely with. I was invited as a keynote speaker, a recognition of my rising influence and success. The ballroom was filled with polished suits, sparkling dresses, and conversations buzzing with power. And there she was, across the room, standing beside him, the so-called alpha she had left me for. Except now, he didn't look so impressive. His arrogance was still there, but it felt thinner, like a mask slipping at the edges. She looked older somehow, her smile strained, her posture tense. When her eyes found me, I saw the shock hit her like a tidal wave. I was no longer the broken man she had discarded. I stood tall, dressed sharply, my presence commanding. People surrounded me, eager to talk, to shake my hand, to be seen in my orbit. She froze, her lips parting, her eyes wide. For the first time since that night at the kitchen table, the power shifted. She knew it, I knew it, and that was just the beginning. The air in the ballroom seemed to thicken when her eyes met mine. For a moment, time slowed, and the world shrank to just the two of us, her standing stiffly beside her so-called alpha, and me surrounded by people who treated me like someone of consequence. She blinked rapidly, as though trying to make sense of the man standing across the room. But there was no mistaking it. I was no longer the ghost she had dismissed. I did not look away. I let her see me, strong, collected, in control. And when I finally broke eye contact, it was deliberate, not because I was unsettled but because she no longer held my attention. That alone was a greater wound than any words I could have said. The event moved on, a swirl of introductions and conversations. My name was called, and I stepped onto the stage. Lights shone down on me, the audience quieted. As I spoke, I could see her in the crowd, watching with wide eyes, her face flushed. Every word I delivered about leadership, resilience, and growth was a direct contradiction to the man she had claimed I wasn't. I could feel the weight of her regret in every pause, in every glance she cast toward me. When the speech ended, the applause was thunderous. Strangers approached me with admiration, executives shook my hand with respect. She, however, stood frozen in the corner, her partner shifting uncomfortably beside her, his face tight with the realization that he was no longer the biggest presence in the room. Later that night, on the terrace overlooking the city lights, she found me. Her voice trembled when she spoke. "You've changed," she said, her tone softer than I remembered. "You're different, stronger." I studied her, taking in the lines around her eyes, the desperation clinging to her words. "No," I said evenly. "I've always been this man. You just didn't see it." Her lips parted, but no words came. The silence between us was filled with years of betrayal and the weight of choices that couldn't be undone. That should have been enough. But it wasn't, because true revenge is not a single moment. It is a story written over time, each chapter a reminder of what was lost and what was gained. In the months that followed, our paths continued to cross. My business expanded, partnerships grew, and my name appeared in circles she could only dream of entering. She and her partner, however, began to falter. The cracks in their perfect facade grew wider. I heard whispers, financial struggles, public arguments, her restless dissatisfaction. The alpha she had chosen was no longer a symbol of strength but of arrogance without substance. One evening, at a charity gala where I was the guest of honor, she approached me again. Her smile was forced, her perfume heavy, her dress a little too polished as though she had tried too hard. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice tinged with desperation. I let the silence linger before answering. "We already did." She shook her head quickly. "No, I mean, really talk. I made a mistake." Her eyes pleaded, searching mine for even a flicker of the man who had once loved her unconditionally. But that man was gone, burned away in the fire of betrayal. "I don't think so," I replied coolly. "I don't revisit the past. I build the future." The rejection hit her harder than I expected. Her face crumbled for just a second before she quickly masked it with a brittle smile. She turned and walked away, but not before I saw the tears glistening in her eyes. That was when I realized something important. Revenge was no longer about punishing her. She was already punishing herself. Every time she saw me, every time she compared her life with what she had thrown away, she was haunted. My success, my transformation, my very existence had become the mirror she couldn't escape. Still, fate wasn't done weaving the threads of irony. A year later, I was invited to speak at an international conference overseas. As I prepared backstage, I scanned the list of attendees and froze when I saw her name. She was attending with her company, a much smaller firm now struggling to stay afloat. During the networking session, she hovered at the edges of conversations, clearly hoping to approach me. I could feel her presence, her longing, but I never offered her the chance. When she finally gathered the courage, her words spilled out in a rush. You're everything I wanted, she confessed quietly, away from the crowd. Everything I thought I'd find in someone else, but it was always you. I see it now. I looked at her, truly looked at her. The once proud, dismissive woman who had shattered me with her words was now standing in front of me, stripped of her arrogance, begging for a sliver of the life she had discarded. I see it too, I said calmly. I see who you are now. Her eyes lit up with hope for a second, but my next words extinguished it. And I don't want it. The silence that followed was deafening. Her face went pale, her lips trembling as if she had been struck. For the first time, she understood the full weight of her choices. She had lost me, not just the man I was, but the man I had become. And she would never have me again. I walked away, leaving her standing there amidst the crowd, her regret echoing in the space I left behind. From that day forward, I never looked back. My life continued to grow. My business thrived, my circle of influence widened, and eventually, I found someone new. A woman who loved me not for what I could give her, but for who I was. Someone who saw me clearly from the beginning. And as for my ex-wife, I heard the stories over time. The relationship she had chosen crumbled. Her partner left, her finances collapsed, and she struggled to regain the footing she once had. Every now and then, her name would surface in conversations, but always with a note of pity. I didn't celebrate her downfall. I didn't need to. The revenge had already been written in the life I built, in the strength I forged, and in the peace I carried. Her final words to me, years after everything, came in the form of a letter. A long, rambling confession of regret, apologies, and longing. I read it once, folded it neatly, and tucked it away in a drawer I rarely opened. Because the truth was simple. My revenge was complete the moment I realized I no longer cared. And somewhere out there, she still remembers the night she told me, I'm not attracted to you anymore. I need an alpha. Go away. And she remembers the man who walked away from her for the last time, stronger, unshakable, untouchable. The man who became the story she could never escape.